How is Britain falling apart?
George Orwell once wrote, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear." Interestingly, when he wrote those words 75 years ago, he had a dystopian vision of London in mind. But it's not clear if he foresaw one thing, that this vision might get dangerously close to coming true so soon. 12,000 people. That's how many British citizens got detained in 2023 for what they posted online. According to The Times, that's an average of about 30 interventions a day. To say Britain isn't a free speech paradise today is to say nothing at all. And I need to clarify one thing. It's not always about violent threats or pure obscenity. Today, it takes very little to attract police attention. Sue Parfitt, a retired pastor. In July 2025, she stood in central London holding a sign with a pro-Palestinian statement. She was detained on suspicion of supporting a terrorist organization. In this case, she was released a few hours later without any charges. But her detention raises a serious question. Since when does mere public support get you in handcuffs?
All of us are concerned about freedom of speech, freedom of expression.
Rose Doherty, a pro-life activist. In 2023, she stood outside an abortion clinic with a sign reading, "Coercion is a crime, here to talk, only if you want." She had violated the so-called buffer zone, meaning a special ban on demonstrations within a set radius near a clinic. It led to her being detained, and even though the court ultimately ruled that she had committed no offense, her arrest itself showed that a silent presence and a sign can be enough to get you in handcuffs. This case is very similar to the one that J.D. Vance mentioned at a European conference some time ago.
The British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Just silently praying on his own. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Graham Linehan, the comedian behind the IT Crowd. He flew into Heathrow in September 2025, and then he was detained by police. The main reason turned out to be a post on X criticizing trans activism. He was held for 12 hours and ultimately released after a mass public criticism. The case was dropped, but he was still treated as a suspect, purely for what he wrote. The internet is full of videos showing officers making their way into people's homes and detaining them for things said online.
So I'm actually being arrested?
You're going to be arrested, okay?
Right.
Take you up to the police station.
Right.
You, okay, this is in relation to some comments that you've made on a Facebook page.
And someone could say it's kind of ridiculous, if it weren't for the fact that the officers themselves often look as if they don't believe in what they're doing. Sometimes they are more than convinced that they've been called to a case that common sense simply cannot justify.
You have been committed for sentence, having pleaded guilty to an offence of publishing written material which is threatening, abusive or insulting, intending thereby to stir up racial hatred.
In many cases, people were stopped for carrying Palestinian flags because someone could interpret them as support for a terrorist group. At the same time, in other incidents, Israeli symbols were banned to avoid public unrest. So ultimately, it doesn't matter which side you're on. It's enough that someone deems your symbol controversial and you can get silenced. And the more police chase decent people for online posts, the less time they have to catch truly dangerous people who are still out there. Clearance rates for violent attacks, especially stabbings, fall year after year.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. In relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our.
On 13 September 2025, hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets. People walked with English flags and Union Jacks. Crosses of St. George were seen at every corner. Flags were all over cities and slogans about safety and freedom filled the air. This was a mass protest against censorship and the overall fear that a simple flag could be branded a provocation. But even this time, the police had intervened. There were some incidents of clashes, and police began confiscating banners, saying they might cause alarm. Sometimes even British flags were literally taken from people's hands. The mainstream media straight out called this entire protest a far-right extremist thing, because apparently showing support and patriotism is forbidden these days. Ultimately, it wasn't just another protest. It was the day a simple flag became a test of how much British freedom is left there. But to understand how Great Britain got here in the first place, we have to go back to the beginning, to the time when Britain truly was free. This is where the Magna Carta was born, a document that in 1215 limited the king's power and said plainly that no one, not even the monarch, stands above the law. It was the first written statement that no person could be arrested without due process, that taxes needed the consent of the governed, and power had limits. As the years went by, the Britons introduced a free press, and people began to see themselves as having the right to dissent. But today, the same country is trying disturbingly hard to cut off free speech. As usual, it all started innocently. In 2003, Tony Blair's government passed the Communications Act, a law meant to protect people from harassment and threats online. But this particular law was suited for the internet before social media. Twitter didn't exist. Facebook was just being born. In that pre-social media world, Section 127 was created, a provision allowing prosecution for sending a message that was grossly offensive or indecent. It might have sounded reasonable back then, but now that hundreds of millions of users have arrived, the situation has changed completely. Because now, in the age of tweets and memes, that provision could apply to just about everyone. And over time, the state went even further. You didn't need to threaten or insult anyone anymore. Thus were born the so-called non-crime hate incidents, meaning actual incidents that could get you detained even if no serious crime was committed. It could be a tweet, a meme, a sticker, even a workplace conversation. The culmination came after the 2016 Brexit referendum. With the rhetoric of taking back control came a sharp rise in recorded hate incidents.
Let's get Brexit done on October the 31st. Let's get it done because of the opportunities that it will bring.
The government responded with a Hate Crime Action Plan, a program meant not only to improve reporting but to reshape people's attitudes. That was the start of a new era, an era in which words spoken in the heat of emotion could be treated as a social threat. And that wasn't the end, because soon after, another law followed, the Online Safety Act. In theory, it was meant to protect children from violence and abuse, but in practice, it has created this vast digital censorship system. Under the pretext of shielding users from harmful content, the government gained a tool to track, block, and filter information in real time, all in the name of safety. After the Southport riots, Prime Minister Keir Starmer introduced an additional rule. Let's call it a zero tolerance for hate speech approach. As a result, the country that developed free speech the way we know it today became a place where freedom ceased to be a right and became a privilege, one that can be revoked. So how did it happen? The answer is simple enough. There was no single decree saying that it's all banned from today. It was a slow and convenient process, and free speech was simply taken away from Britons one step at a time. After every crisis, the same script played out. Each and every terror attack made people ask the same question: why didn't the government do something to prevent this? So then the government did something. After the 2005 London bombings, more cameras and surveillance measures were introduced. After the 2011 riots, the state got greater control over the internet. Step by step, every panic handed power a new pretext. In the end, we have to admit that it sounds kind of reasonable, because who doesn't want safety? But at some point, safety literally became a new religion, and in its name, anything can be justified. The government found an excuse to curb freedom, and they took every chance they got. Today, Britons live in a country with more cameras than the population of Manchester, where a post online can get you in a lot of trouble, and where an ordinary citizen becomes a suspect merely for what he stated publicly. And worst yet, if the control so far was fragmented, digital ID is meant to tie it all together.
Digital ID will make our interactions with each other and with the state faster, cheaper, and more reliable.
In 2025, the UK government announced that every citizen could, and in practice would have to, possess a digital identity. Officially, it's meant to make life easier, but it raises serious concerns. The problem is, such a system lets the state know everything about you. Digital ID isn't just verification. It's the backbone of a new infrastructure of control. Banks already can freeze accounts for platform policy breaches. Tech firms deplatform users in cooperation with authorities. And if your digital ID got suspended for whatever reason, you don't just lose an account. You lose access to everything linked to it, perhaps even a driver's license or bank accounts.
I think that 20 years or so on, a couple of decades on, people are looking differently about the idea of digital then cards, probably more digital ID now.
Supporters call it convenience, but on the other hand, history teaches us that every system of control begins with convenience.
Nobody wants to be chipped and pinned and corralled and computerized and controlled by the government, which is what this is all about, digital ID. It's not about keeping immigration down. You don't need, the Navy can do that, the law can do that. It's about controlling us.
A quick comparison with China could give us an interesting perspective. There, the system has been perfected. In some provinces, everyone has some form of a digital ID linked to a bank account or a phone. If you're taken into a program like that, your life could differ greatly, regardless of your social credit score. A high score lets you live normally. Well, as usual as life can get these days. But if your score is low, you might run into problems. For example, when taking out a loan or trying to leave the city. One sentence of criticism about the ruling party, and you can literally become invisible, not only on the internet, but also in public life. To be clear, no one is saying Great Britain is China already, but more and more people wonder if it's worth speaking out at all when a single comment can bring a knock on the door. That's the core of the problem, because freedom doesn't vanish overnight. It disappears quietly. Often it starts with things meant to protect society, and ends with society needing protection from its own state. We've seen attempts to curtail freedom elsewhere too. Take Canada, for example, where the government once decided to block protesters' bank accounts back in 2022. To get the full picture of Canada's domestic situation, you can check out the video currently displayed on your screen.